I mean, the one amazing thing about MMA is we tend to have a lot of pretty damn good announcers. You have Pat Miletich and Frank Shamrock do all right. And I got to mention Mauro Ronaldo because sometimes he listens to the show. Another quality guy. Mauro rubs people the wrong way. I think Mauro is to me what Gus Johnson is to a lot of people. I like the guy. A lot of people don't, but I dig his style. But you know what? As far as the best announcers going, if I'm going to pick one guy to be the best announcer, it's Michael Chiavello, the Australian from Down Under, commentator for all the stuff in Japan right now, K1 and Dream and Heroes and whatever the fuck, Sengoku and all that shit. Michael Chiavello is awesome. He's awesome at calling the action in a believable, incredible way, making it seem exciting when it needs to seem exciting, being honest with the audience, being entertaining in and of himself, but letting the fight be entertaining in and of itself. I think Michael Chiavello is the best. He's my favorite announcer. I enjoy his commentary more than I enjoy anybody else's. So right now, the official 5-star radio answer is Michael Chiavello is my favorite announcer. We got through one page of questions. So now we go on to the next. Who do you think would win a hot dog eating contest between Ben fucking Rothwell, Roy Nelson, Tim Sylvia, and Rico Rodriguez? Well, Rico Rodriguez is in fantastic shape right now. It would be, I don't know. I mean, Roy Nelson is definitely the fattest of all of them right now because, I mean, Tim Sylvia and Ben Rothwell are disgusting fat slobs, and we have a personal grudge against Ben Rothwell on the show just to get paid $250,000 fucking dollars by Affliction for some fucking reason. But Tim Sylvia is obviously a big fat slob. But Roy Nelson, proportionately, is bigger than all of them. I mean, the guy's a lot shorter than them, almost as heavy. He's just giant gut. However, I'm going to go with Tim Sylvia as the one that can eat the most, and here's why. I think Tim Sylvia is a depressing fuck of a man. I think he hates himself. I think he hates his life. And I have a feeling that Tim Sylvia does a lot of pity eating. I think Tim Sylvia sits around on his couch all day long, scratching himself, watching Jerry Springer, and eating. So I think Tim Sylvia would win the hot dog eating contest, and then he would wear the belt around everywhere he went. And finally, what was the first MMA show you ever watched? It was way, way back one, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you I liked the first time. First time I watched it, I go, what the fuck is this? The first show I ever watched, and I can't remember which one it was, is either the second Hoist Gracie Ken Shamrock fight, or it was the first Ken Shamrock Dan Severn fight. I can't remember which one. I don't know, it was Ken Shamrock. I know that much. I can't remember which one of those it was. And at the time, I was like, this is okay, but what the hell is going on? And I really was not a big fan of it at first. But obviously in time, I've grown to know and love the sport like very few else ever have. So I'm grateful that I didn't get totally turned off by it back then. That was all from Brett Jones. Brett, I got through all of your questions. Are you happy now? Jay Botter asks, besides Roy Nelson and Kimbo Slice, who has the best chance of sticking with the UFC and making waves in the division? I presume he's asking out the current cast of the Ultimate Fighter. Brendan Schaub, I think sounds like he's got some potential behind him. I don't know, Marcus Jones perhaps. I can't really give you an honest answer these days. I just don't really know very much about any of these cast members. But I just swatted at a fly on air. It's very professional, I know. So yeah, I just can't really give you a big answer. We'll see when the season's over. Do you like the idea of having WEC championship fights on UFC shows to fill out the cards? We only have 7 minutes left. This is gonna be a hell of a question here. I'm gonna Jay Botter and R. Frederick, who actually has a similar question. I'll answer that question next time I'm playing. Right now I'm gonna go to R. Frederick also asked for my thoughts on when or even if we will see any of the following guys in the UFC. I figure this would be an easy way to end the show. Gegard Mousasi, yes. I think the UFC is interested in him. I think he's interested in the UFC. UFC almost had him come into the company this past August or September. I think he'll be in the UFC within 2 years. He's far and away the top light heavyweight on the planet, not in the UFC right now. And eventually they'll need some more fresh blood in that division. Although I'm looking so forward to next month's Rogerio Nogueira debut in the UFC, taking on Luis Kane. That fight will just be incredibly awesome. It may even be phenomenal. So, but yeah, eventually down the road, Gegard Mousasi will be brought into the UFC, I'm sure. Eddie Alvarez, I can see, maybe. I think there's so much depth at 155 in the UFC, and really anywhere. There's not a strong need to bring him into the company. He's probably going to be getting better money offers from Bellator and Strikeforce and Dream. So Again, I think everybody eventually probably gets in the UFC, but I think Eddie probably not right away. Jake Shields. I think the UFC is interested in him. I think he's interested in the UFC. But again, I think he's going to make bigger money elsewhere. He'll become a bigger star with Strikeforce. I think his star will stay bigger in Strikeforce. That said, Dana White's in the acquisition mode. He will probably sign anyone he can, particularly a guy like Shields, who will be considered a top star. By the way, everybody, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so make sure you tell your loved ones to check their breasts every month in the shower for breast cancer. It kills people and it shouldn't kill people. 5-Star Radio, hawking our own product, and then at the very end of the show, saving lives. Nick Diaz, one of 5-Star Radio's personal heroes. I don't think he shows up in the UFC anytime soon. Again, I think he's one of these guys who's just better off not being in the UFC. I think he's just going to have a longer career outside of it. He can be in bigger fights, more money fights, bigger attractions elsewhere. Plus, the guy is such a flake. Why does the UFC want somebody like that? But again, Dana White, acquisition mode, he'll take anyone he can get. Robbie Lawler, yeah, I think he shows up in the UFC. He's got a real strong working relationship with them. Obviously, good friends with Matt Hughes. They've talked with him. I think they want him in the company. His loss to Shields a few months ago didn't help his cause. But 185 in the UFC is always going to be kind of thin. I mean, it's getting thicker now. That's what she said. But I think that Robbie Lawler will be a welcome addition. Shinya Aoki, no. I think that Joe Rogan obviously wants him in the company, but I think he's just going to be one of those guys that's so much better off in Japan. Kind of like, like Takanori Gomi, you asked about. Again, somebody the UFC was kind of interested in at one point, but just too much money to be made in Japan. You know, Japan may offer these guys $50,000 to fight, and the UFC is going to offer them $5. And the money's just going to be such that the smart play is taking the Japanese money. I mean, but then again, they brought in Karo Uno, so we'll see. And they brought in Yoshihiro Akiyama. But that said, I think Aoki is too valuable to dream, and I don't think that the UFC needs him because he's kind of like Melvin Manhoff, who does not ask about. Melvin Manhoff being such an incredible striker, everybody loves watching him strike over there in Dream and K1. But bringing him to the UFC, he's just not well-rounded enough to compete. Same with Aoki. You put Aoki in the UFC, on the ground, he's awesome. There's so many guys in the UFC who are too well-rounded, they will just outstrike him and knock him out. I don't think Aoki would have the longest future in the UFC. Takanori Gomi, there's a chance actually you might see Gomi in the UFC, just because I believe the UFC will eventually try to run a show in Japan. He'll be available as a semi-name. Maybe they can get a little cheap. And finally, the last name on this list, the last thing we'll talk about at all on the show is Ben Askren, a world-class wrestler out of wrestling University of Missouri, I believe it was. Just competed for the United States in the Olympics. He's a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu. Been training Jiu-Jitsu for a while. Just competed in the Abu Dhabi Combat Club's World Submission Grappling Tournament in Barcelona, Spain. Won a few matches. Did not win the tournament, but acquitted himself decently well for a guy who really only just begun his MMA training. Askren, all the potential in the world. We'll see if he learns his striking or anything like that. Obviously, that's a necessity. But he's got what they call the funk. He's got a crazy wrestling style that people aren't used to. A lot of charisma. He's, like I say, a purple belt in Jiu-Jitsu, already been training the sport for a while. He's had his mind in the game. He's been thinking about MMA for several years. I think Ben Askren absolutely is in the UFC, and he could be a future star in the UFC. But ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That is our first ever hour-long simulcast here on the show. We're at 58 minutes here. Pretty damn good. I have no idea how this is going to work. This may end up being a giant disaster. But I hope not. I hope you've all enjoyed it. To everybody watching on YouTube, radio listeners, we're talking to YouTube people now. To everybody listening on YouTube, thank you. Thank you for giving this a shot. Figure4online.com. We'll take one last look at the banner. F4Wonline.com. I can't believe that thing didn't fall down. My name is Mike Hoffman. This is 5-Star Radio, the preeminent mixed martial arts podcast on the internet today for people who do this with, webcams and sheets of paper for backgrounds. But that all said, we will be improving our broadcast in the future. My plan is to one day be able to actually break down and show you how I see when I analyze fights. If I can eventually get the video editing software to do what I want it to do, we will be editing this stuff in ways we've never done before. But that's all coming in the future. But until I see you guys next week, my name is Mike Hoffman for 5-Star Radio, an integral part of the F4WOnline.com Radio Empire network of doom, saying to one all, good fight, good night, et au revoir, mes amis.